Cool.
Very good. Okay. All right, friends.
And of course, we do meditation for the first time on Sunday at the park.
Mm-hmm.
Class. And I said, I can't be meditated anymore. I'm just trying to get over the first one tonight.
Everybody's different.
Everybody's different.
Push that button. Okay. Okey-doke. So we have another minute or two before practice starts. So just, if you've connected a little bit early, settling in, having any props you might like to use, blocks, a blanket. We're going to do the sequence that we're going to explore today. And by explore, I truly mean, like, if something is not working for you, A, you don't have to do it, right? And B, if you want to layer on something different, or just maybe the shape works for you, but you want to do a different shape. I don't know, examples help, right? So let's say I cue half pigeon. And you can do half pigeon, but you don't feel like doing half pigeon, or you know the sensation in double pigeon, or supine pigeon, or seated pigeon, or any other hip influencing shape just works for you better. Do that, right? So we'll start supine here in a bit. If you want to start supine right now, 2 thumbs up. If I do that, I might fall asleep, so I'm going to sit up for a little bit longer. I had a delightful and lengthy walk with a friend this morning. And so I'm really looking forward to the hips and hamstrings. So we're going to do some hips and hamstrings, invite some movement in just to get rid of the gremlins. And then, the region from like the mid thigh up into the low back. With the hips, let me give it just a little bit of time before I dive into my dissertation on the ilium. It's not a dissertation so much, a little bit. It's like a mini dissertation. So yes, having any blocks or blankets or anything you might like to use for your practice, that will be tuning into the hips and the hamstrings, which then relate to the low back and really can translate up into the rest of the body. And so as we move through practice, a few of the things we'll do in the beginning are a little more subtle, but they are in relation to our ilium. Okay, every time I say ilium, I need to touch my low back or my butt. Our ilium are if you think about like a Halloween skeleton or just a human skeleton, the ilium are those 2 flangey bones that make up your pelvis. There's one on either side. I think about them as like elephant ears because they're sort of oblong and it's an ear shape. And so if you think about your ilium to some degree shaped kind of like this because they flange out to the sides, this little spot between my thumbs is where your sacrum lives, right? And then everything is connected by tendons and ligaments that connect out into the muscles, right? And so for our ilium, and not to scale, it is, for most of us at least, on each ilium, the hip socket is in the bottom, lower bottom corners. And so if my hip socket is roughly here, our femur bone comes out. And so we have the ability to walk, and when we walk, our ilium moves, right? When we move our whole leg, that whole one side comes forward. And it's not super dramatic, depending on you and your body. But with this idea we're going to explore, experiential learning, is the different directions that our ilium can move, which influence our body, as well as the way our external or extremities move, influence things within the core, and finding that symbiotic relation between the core, right, including your pelvis, and how the limbs move. So we have external rotation, right? So if I were to sit here in Sukhasana, or even more so in butterfly, that's external rotation. We have internal rotation. Think about things like eagle legs, or even taking a twist. That'll be internal rotation on one side. And these are independent, so you can move them about on their own. We have this posterior tilt, anterior tilt is forward, and then the posterior tilt is back. And so that's like our cow-cat. So we move through the practice. I'll bring awareness to that as we move through some things. If it speaks to you, if you're like, that's interesting, cool, just tune into it and notice how it feels. If you're like, I don't give a rat's booty about my ilium, I just want to do some yoga, we'll do that too, right? Okay, so we're going to do all of those things in an hour. It'll be great. We're going to start supine. And as you come down, have maybe a blanket available nearby. Where'd my blocks go? Having your blocks within arm's reach, just in case you want to prop anything along the way. And as you come down to your back, you might choose to start literally just lying flat on your back in Shavasana. If lying flat on your back is not comfortable, you're welcome to put a rolled something beneath your knees or walk your feet in a bit. Allowing all the thoughts and ideas that I just spewed all over you, invited you to consider, just to settle down around you for right now. Know that these ideas are available to you to reference in the next hour-ish. Perhaps you choose to set them aside for now and revisit them in the future. And you spend time here in this first shape. Take a bit of time to tune into what parts of your body, where on your body do you meet the mat and the floor, and the foundation of your space all the way down into the earth beneath you. And from that grounded place, feel how the breath expands the body up off of the floor. And the whole front body gently expands as you breathe in. And what softens as you breathe out? And here, just for a point of reference, take one of your hands and see if you can slide it under your low back, or at least find a little bit of a nudge under the low back and see if there's some space here. And there may or may not be, depends on our anatomy. Just gonna see if you can slide even just your fingertips, right? There's maybe a little rise there in your low back, your lumbar spine. And it's just a point of reference. Okay. So once we've investigated that, we'll bring our hand back out. You're going to walk your feet in. As you walk your feet all the way in, ankles under knees, take the feet wide. And then begin to kiss the knees together. And this is going to give us an internal rotation of the femur bones, our thigh bones. You might notice you need a little wiggle in your back and your spine to kind of settle into what happens. And so here in constructive rest, take a few breaths, noticing what this might feel like in the hips, in the lower extremities. And once again, take one of your hands and see if you can even find, maybe it's a little less space, or I can't get my hand underneath of me at all at this point, because the internal rotation of our thigh bones has created this internal rotation of the low back, which has neutralized / flattened the low back to take the curve out of your lumbar spine. So that space is no longer there. For some of us, lying down like this is much more comfortable because the curve in the low back can be uncomfortable if you lie with legs long, which is why often having a rolled blanket, a bolster, or this is an extreme version of giving that lift to the legs, the internal rotation, to create some support in the low back. All right. From here, we'll drift the knees apart, walk your feet in a bit. Take your left leg, extend that long on the floor, and let your right knee butterfly open to the side. As you come open to the side, you may feel some tension on the inner hamstring. If you have that blanket nearby, you might fold it to find just enough. It's a little bit of an extra fold, or you can take a block under the edge of your right knee to come into resting tree. And so here in resting tree with a long left leg, and that right knee opening to the side, breathe into your inner right hamstring. Perhaps bring your awareness back to those two bones, your pelvis, your ilium. And notice how one, even just the whole sort of right side, has a little bit of a lift, a little bit of an opening, and that left side feels more grounded, feels different. And take another breath there. And begin to draw that right knee back up to the ceiling and slide your right leg on. Check in with one leg in relationship to the other. And begin to slide the left foot in. Invite the left leg out to the side. Now you may find there's a very different sensation or experience when it comes to the left side. I'm a fan of using the folded blanket for support here. It's just my personal preference, but whatever you might need, and maybe you need a little bit more. Maybe you don't need anything at all, right? Your practice, your shape. Breathe into the inside of your left leg. And tune into the sensation that shows up here on this side. And how the left side of your hips feels a bit different than the right side. And take one more breath for this side. And drift the left knee back up to the ceiling. And invite your left leg long. And once again, checking in with one side in relationship to the other. I'm going to have one block on either side just for sake of, I might want to use them. From where you are, walk both feet in. And bring the soles of feet to the floor, invite the knees to butterfly open to the sides. If you find that you have plenty of room and nothing is super intense, you can stay just within these butterflies. You might choose to take your blocks and turn them to some height that allows the legs to be supported so you have some sensation, but it's not overwhelming. So here we've now brought into play the external rotation on both sides. You can consider this the opposite of constructive rest. The thigh bones, butterfly out to the side, giving a little lift. Once again, take your hand and then notice you may have a whole lot more space. Actually tuck it all the way under and find my spine. Maybe there's simply just a bit more space under your low back, showing us that the external rotation has created the back bend in the low back. And noticing how it feels. For some of us, it's relatively comfortable. For others, it's more like medieval torture. And if it feels unpleasant, you can add extra propping to support yourself. It doesn't have to be the most dramatic supine butterfly ever. Anything beyond neutral is something. Take a few more breaths here. You might play with lowering the blocks a bit just to see what would happen, noticing the sensation in your hip flexors and your inner hamstrings and how things feel here. And take one more breath into your version of Reclined Butterfly. Letting that go. And we'll gently draw the knees all the way back up, soles of feet to floor. And walk your feet out wide once again to the edges of the mat. Let the knees kiss together. And notice how that feels. And let the low back soften. Maybe a little wiggle to let the low back release. And breathe in. Breathe out. Keep the feet wide. Take the knees to point to the ceiling. So the feet are wide, the knees are up. Take a breath in. With your exhale, let the knees drift over to the right. With an inhale, drift the knees up through the center. And exhale, drift knees to the left. Inhale up. Exhale to the right. Inhale up. And exhale to the right. We'll inhale up to the ceiling. As you drift your knees over to the right, we'll spend a little time here. If you find that there's too much sensation, you can put your left leg on top of your right leg. You can also put a pillow in between your knees or put a block under your left knee to give it some support. 5 smooth breaths here, making note of the external rotation on your right side and the internal rotation on your left. And perhaps simply making note of what it feels like to be in this shape on this side. And then gently bringing yourself back up to center. Oh. You want to kiss together in the middle for a moment. Let everything release and neutralize. If that feels good to you, awesome. Allow the knees to drift over to the left, the second side. Here on the other side, the left leg is externally rotated. Right leg is internally rotated. I notice some stuff in my right hip, like this at the point, the front corner of your hip, if you will, or the top right corner of my right side, down into my IT band, as well as some stuff in my low back, where the low back meets the top of your hips. So your, not your obliques, but your forget what that muscle group is right there. Nonetheless, that's what I'm feeling. Sometimes it doesn't matter what it's called so much as you're like, oh, that's sensation. I just yell out a word later, it probably is whatever that muscle group is. No, your lats are higher. Okie doke, so let's bring ourselves back to center. Maybe a little wiggle from side to side with the knees, a little drift to release the hips. Maybe even rock back and forth on the hips if that feels good to you. Feels nice. Now if you found some movement, we'll draw the knees all the way in, holding your thighs or holding your shins in Upasana. You can continue with that rock from side to side if that felt good. You can certainly stay in stillness if you'd rather. You might also take some big circles, rolling around the whole outside edges of your hips, all the way around 2 or 3 times. You found 2 or 3 circles one way, taking 2 or 3 the other way. And then eventually coming back. So come back into center. If there's anything going on with your neck or shoulders, just roll over to one side, or the option to rock up to a seat. Both are good to invite us to eventually find our way. Soft gaze or closed eyes to find the seat. As you come up, you might notice a little whoosh, a little energy. Feel like sitting on the edge of a blanket, having that in your body. And as you come in to find Sukhasana, taking the cross of the legs, the gaze be soft to the floor, invite the eyes to close. And from the base of the spine, with an inhale, imagine the inhale running all the way up the length of the spine. And the exhale, softening the shoulders, heavy down the back. Here with the head stacked above the heart stacked above the hips, come back to the awareness of where on your body do you meet the floor. And from those places on your body that meet the floor, come back to that grounding, that rooting here in your seat. In this grounded, mindful seat, invite a breath in. And a breath out. And with an inhale, roll the shoulders up around your ears. And the exhale, invite the shoulders back and down. The inhale, shoulders up around the ears. And exhale and back and down. And taking another round, shoulder rolls up, and back and down. Here we'll bring our arms off to the side, palms to the ceiling. As you inhale, sweep the arms up. Take a seated twist over to your right, one hand to your knee, one hand behind you, sitting tall as you breathe in, and taking the gaze and the chin over towards your back shoulder. Same smooth, full breath. With your next inhale, release the fingertips, drift back up through center. Bring your left hand down. Take a lateral stretch over to your left side. Hips even, rooted down. Sit tall to breathe in and just take that lean across. You might look up or forward or down as you breathe into the right rib cage. With the inhale, bring the spine back up to neutral. Take your floating hand across the body into your twist on the second side. Again, from the base of the spine, sitting nice and tall. And taking your twist over towards your left. With an inhale, come all the way back up, keeping the hips level, the spine long, right hand drifts down, and keeping that left hip rooted as we lengthen through the side body and take that lean from the waist, the side body, all the way up. Taking the gaze in the direction that is comfortable for you as you breathe into your left side. The inhale, come all the way back up. Bring our hands down in front. So as we find ourselves here in folded Sukhasana, palms down, maybe plenty of sensation. Check out the outside of this leading leg and see how it goes. We might begin to warm up the hips a bit more into a forward fold. I'm going to use a block. So you can use a block here, a bolster. Come all the way down to the floor if you'd like. Check in with the sensation that shows up for you and breathe into that sensation. Take one more breath here. Empty that out. If you had come forward, beginning to make your way back up to the top. From here, we'll inhale, roll the shoulders up and back and down. Fingertips behind you, shift the weight back. Know what leg is in front currently. Maybe take a moment to float through boat, navel into spine. Super strong core, nice long spine. And then from there, bring the opposite leg in front. And so here with this opposite leg in front, we'll inhale, sweep the arms up. And bring our hands down. Length from tailbone through crown of head. Check out the new leading leg and how it feels. Now with this other side, you may find that staying on your palms, grabbing a block, or coming a bit deeper. Any number of things here that suits you. As you breathe into the other side. Listen to your breath. Invite one more breath here. Let that go. Begin to find your way back up once again. At the top, inhaling the shoulders up and back and down. Nice. From here, we're going to meet with the left leg extended and the right foot in. So this mimics the shape we had earlier, right? But just supine. So as we move through a couple shapes that will mimic where we were supine, I invite you to notice what the sensation feels like here for you being upright. This will be very different simply because we've now folded ourselves at the hips. We've shortened our hip flexors, which changes the level of sensation. Now what it will also do is because now we're sitting upright and we're creating tension in our low back, if we choose to come forward, it's going to create sensation in a different place. So the option here to keep the leg nice and long, sort of a half butterfly, half forward fold, with an option, in fact, to forward fold. And maybe you do this with a little bit of, actually with that extended foot be soft, a little length to start, just finding that extension of the spine. And then from that extension, finding a bit of length where you have, then allow everything just to soften, become heavy so the head drapes forward, palms can rest. If you have this urge to drag yourself a bit deeper, you can also flip your palms towards the ceiling. The head heavy, big full breath into where you're feeling it. My guess would be your left hamstring, whatever leg is extended in front of you, in case you have a different one, which is totally cool. As long as we do both sides, we'll be all right. Big full breath here for your hamstring. And anything else you might be feeling, right? For some of us, there's not a whole lot going on in the bent leg. For others, you're like, no, that's what's talking to me, Gretchen. Invite another breath in. Empty that out. Begin to find your way all the way back up. If you could come forward, inviting the shoulders up and back and down. Nice. So let's bend this knee. Extend the opposite leg long. And here's we find that second side. Ankles a little tight. Movement that might feel good to you as you settle in here. All right. So, oh, that's already, I went to lean forward. My leg's like, what are you doing, Gretchen? So that's just something to be aware of. If you want to put something under your knee so that you don't have as much hyperextension there, you can certainly do that. You can spend some time sitting nice and tall, right? A little bit of a forward fold may create a whole lot of sensation. And if that's the case, breathe into that sensation. If you're like, actually, no, I don't feel a blessed thing, you can simply explore, right? We talked about that earlier. The exploration of your practice. Come forward a bit more, kind of see how that goes. The head be heavy. The torso to drape after finding that length. Softening into the sensation in your extended leg. Big full breath here. And take one more breath for this side. Empty that out. And begin to find your way all the way back up to the top. Shoulders back and down. Awesome. So we have found the two halves of our butterfly. So let's bring those two halves together, bringing our legs out into seated butterfly, which again, as I made reference, our hip flexors, or iliopsoas, which lives here, well, it crosses through this area, which we call it our hip flexor, in part because it allows us to draw the leg in, it allows us to step, gives us the ability to have a lap. If we didn't have that muscle, tendon, ligament business, I would actually not be able to sit upright. I'd be falling backwards. Because our iliopsoas, as a unit, one on each side, begins as a fan in your lumbar spine, your low back, and then comes around, becomes ropey, crosses over your hip crease, wraps around and connects the back of your knee. So there's lots of stuff that can happen when our psoas are tight, and also our quads connect into this region. And so if our quads are tight, that can also create sensation. So all that being said, because we're sitting upright, it changes how things feel. Maybe the knees can come open a little bit easier. Maybe you still want some propping for support. It depends. Now that I've distracted you for a bit in this upright version, you may have some sensation or not. You might be like, no, actually. Some of us are just fairly mobile in certain ways, have more availability for range of motion. The levels of mobility can be different. So that being said, you can choose to stay upright if this is where the sensation lives. You could begin to find your way forward if you prefer. You can put some props in between you and your feet if you'd like. Whatever your version of folded butterfly is, do that. And breathe into that. To ensure that your ability to breathe has gauged where there's enough sensation, but not so much that the sensation is sharp or pinchy and hinders your ability to breathe. Like the head to be heavy. Smooth, full breath. And continuing to breathe into your version of folded butterfly. And take another breath in here. And let that go. And then taking the time you need, just as much or as little. No need to rush as you find your way up. Take a little shift. As you find your way back up from your folded butterfly. Sitting nice and tall, you can bring your hands to the fronts of your knees. Create just a bit of leverage as you looking level, maybe a bunch, because we were just theoretically in the forward fold, right? So if coming level, a little lift of the heart is enough, awesome. If you need a little or would like a little bit more, you might look up towards the ceiling, creating a bit of a back bend, right? And so this is the posterior tilt, right? The pelvis is tilting forward, the tailbone's coming back. I think about the cow pose and or like a happy puppy, lifting its hips, wagging its tail, right? That lift into cow. Whereas if we round the spine, chin to chest, tuck the tailbone in, I think about this more like, so it's cat or an unhappy puppy tucking its tail. Okay, so this is the anterior tilt, tilting the bottom of the pelvis forward. We come back to neutral. And it just struck me that it references the bottom of the pelvis when it comes to that anterior and exterior, and I'm not sure why. Oh, look that up. Okay, let's bring hands beneath the knees. Walk our feet out to the edges of the mat. Fun fact, I have something about to find out. Come back onto your palms, maybe back onto your forearms. Just invite, revisit this hammock, but just in a slightly different way. Like feel different as well. We've done a bunch of shapes in between the last time, and our body's in a slightly different place. If you find some swooshes, we'll come back up. Come up to our seat. If you have any props around, scooching them out of the way. We're going to meet in table. Now, anything we do from here in table, you can take from table, or we can if you want to take some time in between in down dog, you can do that too. Okay. So first in table, we're going to investigate once again the forward fold and the back bend. And in this case, the pelvis is a little more flowing in neutral because we're no longer sitting on it or lying on it. So we'll start with just the cueing and the idea of looking forward, and then begin to look up to the ceiling. And as you do that, the spine's going to dip down because that's just how it works. Listen to the low back. Notice how that feels. You're here in a back bend. And then begin to take the gaze down to the floor. And as you look at your knees or your navel, check in with how your back feels here in this relative forward fold. And as you inhale now, bring your mind's eye, your awareness back to your ilium, your hips. And imagine here, the top edge of your ilium are tilted forward, the bottom edge is tilted back. And again, as we begin to round the spine, the bottom edge is tucking in like a tail of an unhappy puppy or a nervous puppy. So just notice that movement and what it feels like and how that influences the sensation in your low back. Take one more round, just getting awareness of what that feels like for you and how the spine itself and then the pelvis works together and influences the rest of the body. And come back to neutral. Here in neutral, you can stay in tabletop. If you would like to take a couple breaths in down dog, spread your fingers wide, tuck the toes under, lift the hips up and back. Shoulders down the back, elbow creases in. Heels track towards the floor, but do not have to touch. If you're in table, continue to press the floor away with your palms, super strong with the shoulders. We'll all breathe in. Breathe out. Inhale, lift the right leg up from wherever you are. And then bring the right knee forward. So if you're in table, just bring that right knee forward beside the right wrist. The right knee is closer to the edge of the mat. And this is where we have that pose I mentioned so long ago, half pigeon. If half pigeon does not suit you for some reason, you don't have to stay here. If it bugs the knee or gives you a challenge, then you might use a block or a bit of a blanket to give yourself some support. Maybe a little bit of both, just depending on what it is you might like to use. If you'd rather come to a seat and take a seated shape or a supine shape, please feel free. Here in upright pigeon, you can spend time and check in here, noticing we have a bit of a back bend, that sensation in the low back. You can remain here or begin to explore more depth, coming forward onto a block or onto your forearms or any place deeper that might suit you. Checking in with the level of sensation that exists and your ability to breathe while you're spending time here. Breathing to the outside of your right leg, into your right glute, or breathing into the sensation you're finding in your given shape. Invite another breath in and out. And wherever you might be, notice what the sensation feels like now in relationship to when you first moved into your given hip influencing shape. If you come in a bit deeper towards resting half pigeon, beginning to walk yourself back up. If you're in a supine or seated shape, you can take hammock again as a counter. You can stay further forward, less of a back bend if you bring the hands forward, or if you walk your hands back up, you're going to create more of a back bend, lifting that heart, shining it forward. Listen to the low back and decide what feels good to you. I have a feeling my leg does not want to do it, but you have the option, certainly, if you're here, to bend that back leg. Yeah, that's about as far as mine's going to go, which is totally awesome, because I feel a quad stretch, and that's enough. Some of us might reach back and grab that foot, but it's not required. If you want to, feel free. If you were in half pigeon or one-legged king pigeon, come back down to release the leg. If you're seated or supine, you can return back to table or down dog for dynamic counter movement. That feels good to you, which can be done in table or down dog. Anything that helps you move the body around a bit, release the sensation. Nice. Then from where you are, if it feels good to you, take that left leg long. Then bring the left leg forward, knee next to the left wrist. The angle of your shin of that front leg can be any angle, as long as you want to keep the heel from underneath. You just want to be under your left thigh. You want to bring it forward a bit, but does not have to be parallel. Okay, so finagling that second side. Woo! A little bit of movement to kind of settle into that. A prop or two that may be helpful under the left glute. All right. Now, if you're here and you're like, this is terrible, why would I do this, Christian? You don't have to, right? You can come to a seated shape. You can come to the supine version of half pigeon. Do the supine figure 4. If you're here with me in this shape, you can begin to walk yourself forward. Breathe into the front of your right leg, the outside of your left leg, and anywhere else sensation shows up. Smooth, full breath. As you continue to breathe here, noticing where the mind is. If it has floated off, no judgment, no frustration. It's just part of the practice. And to notice where the mind may or may not be. And then choosing to invite your awareness and your attention back. Here and now. As you breathe in, and breathe out. Notice how this shape feels currently in relation to where you had started. Taking your time, coming out of whatever depth you may have found in your given shape, counter shape or movement of your choice. And in your own time, if you want to come to table or down dog for any additional counter movement that feels good to you, you are welcome to do so. And after you found that movement, we'll come back to neutral, come back down to your knees and just make our way around. We're going to return onto our back. Having any props nearby that you might like to use. Finding our way down to the floor. Here on the floor, we'll take a reclined twist to wrap up our practice. Either I got taller or my mat got shorter, I'm not sure which. Okay, here we go. Actually, take a moment and just notice lying down feels really amazing. Yeah, I think so. If you want to just lie here, you're welcome to do so. This may be like the moment in time you have in the day where you can just lie flat and be happy. We will finish here supine, but if you want more time lying still, just ignore my neck. Not ignore, just sort of be aware of my next set of instructions and know, like everything else, they are optional. If a supine twist would feel good, slide your right foot in, root your right foot down, lift your hips up and over to the right a little bit. As you gather your right leg in, give it a squeeze. And then take the right leg across the body. If you want to prop it up, you can. If you simply want it to float in a more yin-ish fashion, you can do that too. Smooth, full breath into the outside of the right leg, the hip, the glute, and everywhere else you're feeling sensation. Invite another breath in and out. And begin to find your way back to center, where we even out the hips and extend the right leg long. And checking out one leg in relationship to the other. Shifting any props to the other side that you might like to use. Left foot slides in, left foot roots down, up and over to the left with the hips a bit as you give your left leg a squeeze. Taking the left leg across the body. As you spend time here, take a moment to check in once again with your hips, your ilium. There's a bit of an internal rotation depending on how much support you have under your leg. It's going to be more or less internal rotation of that left side. Very much so, this is fairly neutral depending where the leg lands, and much more about the low back, the lumbar spine, and the twist that runs up the length of the spine. So noticing where the sensation lives here, breathing into those places. breathe out. Begin to draw yourself back to the midline once more. Bringing the hips back to the middle-ish. And then here, whatever would feel good to you is maybe one last shape. Up asana, giving yourself a squeeze. Happy baby pose. Something else I haven't thought about that would just feel good to you. And from where you are, landing either in reclined butterfly pose. And if you're not a huge fan, you can come into constructive rest or legs long. In whatever shape you've placed your legs, check in with how the sensation feels in relationship to an earlier version you took. A hand to your heart and a hand to your torso as you breathe in. And breathe out. And feeling the breath move in your body. Thanking your breath for being the foundation of your practice. Thanking yourself for making the time to come to your mat, and to move and to breathe and to be still and to breathe. And thanking your body for being so patient and resilient and strong on and off the mat. Invite another breath in. Let that go. As you let everything go, settling your body into your last shape of your practice. You can come all the way back to supine, perfectly flat Shavasana. You could choose to find some support under the legs. And finding whatever shape here gives you a place you can rest. And come back to tuning into the places on your body that meet the floor. Visualize pouring your exhales into those places. As you soften and sink back. Into your Shavasana. breathe in. And breathe out. You begin to invite gentle movement back to your body. Wiggling and turning. And inhale can extend arms as you breathe into a stretch. Fingertip to toe tip. Taking your time to draw your knees in towards your body and find your way over to one side. With soft or closed eyes, gently make your way back up to find your seat. Here in your seat, palms come together, Anjali Mudra, Mudra of offering. Thumbs rest against heart center. As you breathe in, feel the body breathe in. As you breathe out, feel the body breathe out. Offering yourself gratitude. And offering gratitude out into the world. Bring thumbs to third eye point, your seat of intuition. I thank you for sharing your time, your energy, and your beautiful practice with me. Until our paths cross again, be well. Namaste. Thank you. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and let us know. And we'll see you soon.